Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this podcast, you will discover interviews with procurement and technical experts, business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. These experts will help you to develop and grow, accelerate your career, improve your business, save money, and buy smart. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. My next guest is one I am quite jealous of. As you will soon discover, he has the classic DJ voice, perfect for podcasting, radio and negotiations, as advised by former FBI negotiator Chris Voss, that is. Pete Mohr is a successful entrepreneur, has been the owner of multiple businesses for over 25 years, is a former business broker, the host of the Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast, and is also a Business Made Simple certified coach. Today, I wish to uncover two particular tools taught and applied by Pete called the 5P's and the Wheel of Momentum. Let's see how they apply to business and, of course, procurement and supply chain. So without any further delay, I welcome Pete onto the podcast. Hi, Pete.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
Oh, you're most welcome. Looking forward to this. So great to have you on the show. Can you put some meat on the bones of my introduction and help my listeners learn a little bit more about your journey and expertise?
Well, sure. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I usually have owned two businesses or more at a time through most of my career. I'm a family man, 3 boys. And if anybody's watching, I play some instruments and have played in a band for many years. So, just enjoy life, enjoy business, enjoy relationships, my family and friends and all that kind of stuff. And love having chats around all of those things. I like to talk, Dave, so that's,
that's pretty helpful in our game.
I mean, just part of who I am.
Fantastic. Let's put some context, obviously, around yourself and your businesses. So your client base, essentially, I believe you predominantly work with business owners that are generating somewhere around 1 to 10 million. I think that's right, in sales.
Yeah, I do. From the Simplifying Entrepreneurship side of things, working with companies that are past startup and sort of into, usually sort of 2 years plus from that perspective and rolling around thinking about what it is they want to do next and how they want to set up their business and those kind of things. You get through that sort of initial crazy period, that overwhelmed period of, usually 1 to 3 years where you're doing everything and and if you're getting fed up and overwhelmed and sort of tired of that and you want to set up some systems and structures and things like that are going to take you through that, stealing into the next one, then that's sort of my sweet spot for what I do.
Yeah. So let's talk about, say, the breadth of the industries you tend to work with. We're talking manufacturing, we're talking service orientated. What kind of companies do you deal with mainly, or is it everything?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is kind of a little bit across the board as opposed to super niche because the businesses that I've owned in the past are across the board. So I actually have several different sort of things around there. I own service businesses, bathroom renovation companies, cleaning companies, things like that for, the first sort of 15 years of my entrepreneurial career. And the last 10 or 12, I have been more on the retail side of things. So I work with retailers and associations around retailers and things like that, and some groups as well as one-on-one coaching. But I mean, I've helped lawyers and accountants and different things like that along the way too. And I think, the interesting thing about what I do is that it's not sort of industry specific so much, because when working with the entrepreneurs, I'm not working with the managers on how to manage. I'm working with the entrepreneurs on how to, what I call, turn their frustrations into freedoms and, free themselves up to be able to do the leadership portions of their business as opposed to the management portions of their business. And I think that's sort of a little bit generic from that perspective. But if you're feeling that sort of frustration, that overwhelm, as though you're tied to your business and you can't take a vacation and you can't, everybody's decisions are coming to you all the time for formalization and all that kind of stuff, then that's sort of most entrepreneurs get to that point, and then they're wondering, how do I get through this? And it doesn't matter whether you're leading a law firm or whether you're leading a retail company or whether you're leading a paint related business or a wholesale company. From that perspective, it really just if you're at that sort of stage where you're thinking, you know what, there's a phrase I like to use: you own your business and it shouldn't own you. So if you're feeling that your business is owning you, then we should talk.
Okay. Do you have any preferences out of interest? Is there any particular line that works for you more than anything else or not?
In what way?
Well,
how do you mean any line?
For me, I love hands-on type businesses. I love products.
Oh, yeah.
I love manufacturing things, love making things. Is there anything in your range of businesses that really do fire you up more than others?
Not so much. I love talking business. And like I said, when we talk about these things, we're talking about setting structures and systems and everything for the entrepreneur, not so much digging down into the running of their business, of that plant, of that retail store. I mean, we do get into some of that, and there's obviously certain conversations around that sort of stuff. But, if there's a problem, then that's what we do. It's like, most entrepreneurs, here's one of the things, and this is why I love working with owners, because most entrepreneurs, one, their partner at home doesn't want to hear about it anymore. Two, their team, even though you say we have an open door policy and all of this stuff, their team never really tells them the real full truth about stuff. And three, their friends and acquaintances typically don't know what the heck they're talking about. So who do they talk to? Who do they bounce these different ideas off of? Who do they actually go to? So I love those questions that come so that we can set up frameworks and systems. Like I'm a framework guy. So let's put it in this framework and go through this sort of questioning so that you can become more clear about the direction that you need to take. I'm not a manufacturing expert, so I'm not going to give my advice on how to run your business. What my job is to clarify your thought process and enable you to make the best decision that you can make to advance your life and your business. That's my job as a coach.
Superb. Understood. Thank you. So let's dive into the 5P's, if we may. Can you explain what these are and expand upon each one as it relates to a particular business?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we can dig into a few of the ones that are more pertinent to your listeners here, Dave, for sure. But the 5P's essentially are these: your promise, your product, your process, your people, and your profit. And, when you have alignments, well, it all starts with your promise. And, I'll just kick it off there and we can dig into some of these other ones. Yeah. But, with the promise, the promise could be a whole, 1-day session, essentially. But to break it down in its easiest format, one, what is your client's problem? Like their true problem. Two, how do you uniquely solve that problem, different from any of your competitors, different from anybody else that's in that space solving the same problem? Okay. Three, how does their life look after they used your services or product? Okay. So think about that. What's their problem? How do you uniquely solve it? And what's the transformation you're taking them over to? What does their life look like after the problem's been solved by you? That's the promise. And so many customers and so many clients that I have right now may have had a promise for the last 10 years. And over the last 2 years, that promise has changed. And why has it changed? Well, because these world events that have happened all around COVID has changed the way people buy. It's changed the way people sell. It's changed the way people deliver. It's completely changed the way a lot of businesses have been operating. Yet, a lot of the structural decisions are still being made on a promise that was a few years ago. So, you know what? Updating of that promise, truly going back and finding out, okay, well, that was their problem, but is it still their problem? Are your products, which is step number 2, the products, are your products still actually aligning with the old promise? Are they going to deliver what is truly wanted by the problem of your client, the current problem of your client.
Yeah.
And so a lot of alignment, again, the alignment of your product, your process, and your people always has to align back to that promise. And if the promise is a little bit sort of skewed and a little bit out of whack, then so is all of the rest of your business, including your profit. So, it's a really important thing, and a thing that I think a lot of leaders have overlooked over the last, I'm going to say quarter in particular, because the first year it was like, we're just trying to get through and all this other stuff. And this last year we're saying, hey, you know what? We've adapted and, some stuff's going okay. Well, now let's refine it. Let's refine it and get back to resetting the promise if we need to. And sometimes it only needs a little tweak, but all of your marketing, all of your hiring, all of your sales, everything's got to go back to that promise all the time. That's why it starts there. So if there's a little bit of stuff that's out of alignment, then there needs to be some work there. We dig into the product. And when I look at the product, it's like, okay, whatever your product or your service is, now it's kind of like, all right, we've got 80%, let's say, that brings you the majority of your business. And you've got 10%, or sometimes more, depending on how much your industry has changed, that needs to be flushed out and let go. And you can't just say, well, we've always done that. Well, if you've always done it, but it's not how people buy anymore, it's not how people sell anymore, it's not what people actually want anymore, it doesn't matter if you've always done it. And that's another entrepreneurial mindset where you kind of get into this thing. It's like, we've been doing this for 10 years. If we let this go, then we have a different business. Well, yeah, you do, because business has changed, right? And it's interesting because there's these stopping blocks along the way, and whether it's in your product, and the same thing with your process. As we move into process, it's that same sort of thing. It's like, well, we've always done it this way. Well, I can tell you, we've used Zoom. We're here recording on Zoom today. We've used Zoom for 5 or 6 years now. Well, 2 years ago when all this happened, I can't tell you how many people I taught how to use Zoom. And now it's just like Zoom's like using a phone. In fact, I don't even want to use the phone. I want to use Zoom, right? I want to see you. I want to talk to you. We're across the pond, right? You're in England,
Absolutely.
I'm in Canada. And you know what? We're having a chat, but 2 years ago, so many of these people weren't even adapted to these technologies. Things have changed. And, so the processes around your business, whether it's hiring, whether it's firing, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's the execution of how you're delivering your promise, whether it's the bookkeeping and the finance side of your business, all of those, again, you kind of look back and you're saying, okay, well, it's the way we've always done it. Well, is that the way forward? Have things changed? Have you actually updated your process manuals and all of that sort of stuff to allocate for the changes? Have you actually addressed them and assigned accountability around them? Because the only way we can free ourselves up as entrepreneurs is to assign accountability to the rest of our team. It's the only way that you're going to turn your frustrations into freedoms, is to start releasing the accountability. And by the way, your team wants accountability. They don't shun it. They want it. They want to be part of the decision making if they're good team players, right? And they want to be part of the decision making. They want to have their own areas of expertise. They want to live in what I call their love it zone, which, by the way, might be your leave it zone, right? It's like, I want to leave this off my plate because I want to work in my love it zone. And if you have the right team members, the stuff that you don't want to do, they love doing. And that's part of that process in setting up the right team. So you kind of get into that, and that's the people portion, right? So we're moving from promise, but you can see how everything's aligning back to the promise, right? The product's aligning, the process aligning, the people have to align.
Yeah. It's just constant reviewing procedure, almost like the old ISO 9000 systems, where you're constantly reviewing and assessing, testing, checking that everything's doing what it's meant to be doing. As the market changes, you develop. As your customers change, you reassess. But I guess one of the hardest things to assess, though, is often your customer, because the other things are internal, whereas the customer obviously is external. And particularly, as we said, we're talking about the last year or two, where the interaction's been much less on a personal basis. How would you suggest your clients go about that, touching base with clients in a more effective way, perhaps, than we've been used to of late?
Yeah. So that fourth P is people, right? And so I break down people into 3 different areas. And those areas are: 1, your ideal client. like we're going to chat about. 2, your ideal teammates. And 3, your ideal outsourced suppliers. So everyone else could be wholesalers, could be, your virtual VA, could be an outsourced company that looks after your payroll, whatever the case is, any of those outsourced suppliers that help you deliver your promise. Well, how do we look at these and drive home the right people for our sphere of influence? One of the easiest ways to do it, I mean, there's more to it than that, but for this podcast, is to take a sheet of paper and draw a vertical line down the center of it. And on the left, write worst, and on the right, write best. And on top of that, write client. And I know that you can probably remember your worst ever client by name, first and last. So, and you can probably remember your best ever client by name, first and last. So write their names above the worst and best, and then start thinking about what was the worst thing that happened with the worst client, and start brainstorming all those things down that list. Do the very same for your best ever client. Really understand what really repels you about that worst ever, and what makes this experience with your best ever awesome. It's an easy exercise, but it's one that people don't do that often. Because once you start doing that sort of stuff, and by the way, you should do this with your teammate as well, all of your team, and you should do it with all of your suppliers as well. And you should literally take that exercise, formulate a scorecard so that you can scorecard your best ever clients, your best ever team, and your best ever suppliers, so that when a new one comes on board, you can literally rank them in the ways and the things that either you loved or you hated about them. So that you can truly understand, is this somebody that I want to proceed with as a client, as a teammate, or as a supplier? Because that's another way to freedom. Because if you're being frustrated by the people in your business in any of those 3, then it's an aggravation. It like edges at you. It keeps you up at night, all of these things. So all of our marketing, so whether we're marketing to find our best clients, we're going to market and we're actually going to say in our ads and things like this, who we're not looking for as well as who we are looking for. It's okay to repel. We aren't for everyone. It's okay. I said up front, well, I have kind of a wide range of people that I work for, but I don't work for managers. I work for owners only. So I'm repelling managers because I don't actually work with managers of teams and stuff like that. I work with the owner of the business. So I'm upfront about that. It's like, yep. There's a lot of people out there that help management. I'm not one, right? So I do have a wider range of sectors that I work with, but I'm only working with the owners of those because my programs are set up for them. So think about that kind of thing and who you're trying to repel and who you're trying to attract and why those reasons are. I can go through all sorts of different reasons. I mean, and with our shoe stores, we do the same sort of thing, right? It's the same. So who are we attracting? Who are we repelling? And then we're aligning our team that actually wants to work with the people that are our best ever clients. We're aligning our wholesale suppliers, all of our brands and everything to bring in the products that our best ever clients want, not the ones that our worst ever clients want. So that we're aligning everything in place to our promise so that we can enjoy the right amount of profit. And that's the transformation that we talk about, right? It's like, and whether when we first start talking with businesses, business owners, it's like, okay, if you're feeling sort of this, where do we need to first work? Well, some people will say, I'm working 70 hours a week. It's like, okay, we need to draw down some process so that you can relieve some of the work that you're doing. Or I'm finding out that, what I've always done isn't working anymore. Okay, we need to go back and align your promise first, so that we can make sure that your product offering is there and drive that home. Like, it's really when you kind of just look at these different areas of your business, it gives you a framework. I said I'm a framework kind of guy. I love frameworks. It gives you a framework to think about the things that you need to do in order to, have the business and the life that you want as the owner of your business.
Right. I love that. And I'm now going to ask you an interesting question, perhaps. We're talking about the supply side of things. Yeah. How often do you recommend your clients invite their suppliers to do that assessment of themselves? How can I be the best, customer to my suppliers? And what am I doing wrong?
Well, it's so interesting. I told you we own some shoe stores. So the last time we were looking for a new location for a new shoe store, I invited my top 10 brands at the time. 8 of them attended, like the reps for the different brands attended. I rented an offsite room. And I said, listen, I'm going to start a new store and I'm looking for everybody's advice. You guys are my top brands and I would like you all to come for a half day. I'll do up a little presentation. We'll have a little bit of food and that kind of stuff. And we're going to banter around these 7 different locations that I'm looking at. And I want your opinion on whether or not you guys think this is a good spot for your brand within my store, because they know my store. We've been working together, all this kind of, they know our client, they understand our promise. So, and almost all of them said, nobody's ever done this before. Nobody's like, I'm actually kind of feeling a little bit uncomfortable because I've never sat around a table with all these other brands. And, like I have 2 brands that are kind of competing, let's say, in my store. Exactly, it's like, okay, yeah. I've got New Balance and Saucony coming to the table and Keen and Merrell coming to the table, but we're all just chatting around how each of their brands is a placement in my store and where, like, Shootopia is the name of our store here in Canada, our chain. And basically it's like, where is this going to work? And you guys know where your other brands are, your other stores are that are in your brands. So it was a really interesting half a day. And at the end of it, they came out and everybody's saying, wow, that was really interesting and really interesting way to look at that. So I'm using from that perspective, the power and interest and the knowledge of my suppliers to help me build my business. Because if I build my business in the right spot, they're going to do more business, right? And looking in that partnership. So are they part? They're not only part of my product, they're part of my process too, because we're ordering and all that other stuff, but they're also part of my people. When we talked about the ideal suppliers, right? So important there to have these great relationships. And so that you're, it's a two-way street on that product train. And we need to understand, and some of the brands and some of the wholesalers out there don't see it that way. So if you're dealing in your business and you're buying with companies that don't see it that way, then are they the right companies for your business?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm glad you touched on the competitive angle as well, because I've experienced the same. People are very nervous to get into the same room as, I'll say, they're the competition, because they don't want to let anything slip that they shouldn't do for obvious reasons. But there's one common thing here. They all had a common goal, wanting to sell more product. So they're aligned in that respect. Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you make it, those kind of conversations, if you make them sort of not competition based, it's like, hey, listen, you guys are all in my store. So it's not like we're hiding anything here. Like you guys know that you're in our stores, and we're talking here today. I've asked you to come here today to help me with my next store. So just think about how we can work this out so that we all benefit from a placement of a new location.
Yeah, that's super. I like that. Okay, wheel of momentum. Can you talk us through the segments? Should I say segments or spokes? What's the best way to refer to it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it is a wheel. So, spokes, I guess, from that perspective. But when we think about momentum, again, it's another framework, Dave. And, when we think about momentum, everything always starts with clarity. That's why I like frameworks. That's why, we have this 5P framework. Well, in order to get clarity, you need to lay things out in a way that makes your mind sort of unscramble so that you can take it out, assess it, and address it, and then advance it, right? And so with this, what we want to do, doesn't matter what we're doing. So let's say we've got to the 5th P, which is profit. Right. And now once you have profit, you're starting to have freedom, and you've assigned some of the duties to other people and all this stuff. And once you've got to that point, you're starting to think, what's next? We all have squirrel brains as entrepreneurs, right? It's like, what's going to happen next? So now we got to get clarity around that. So we come back and we start this whole wheel of momentum with clarity. And we're using some of these tools. We're writing down what we want to do. We're writing down, whether it's a small thing or a big thing, it doesn't really matter. You can use the same framework, whether you're looking for something that's going to build 2% momentum or 100% momentum, it doesn't really matter. You can use the same framework, but really focusing on the clarity of what it is you want to do, run the 5P model, do that. And then once you've got through that, you're going to start building confidence around this or not, which is also good, right? So because a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm one, have a lot of ideas and not all of them are great. But if you don't run them through the thing, then it just takes up your brain space and your time, and you're thinking about stuff that you're never going to do. And it's kind of like, so let's move on to the things that you do want to do. And this is another good process to do that. So you run your 5P model, and then you're going through this, and I'm building confidence after I've kind of done this and thought about all this stuff and what we could do with this new promise and who we could help and how we can transform them. And it's like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this now. Right? Once you've got that, then you're building the competence around that with your people, with your process. You're building the competence around that. You're putting the things in motion, right? And you're putting those pieces together. So what do you need to do for the competence portion of it? Once you've built your competence, and that's what you're thinking about now. You're thinking about competence. Who am I going to align? How am I going to do this? All of these things. So you're writing and listing all that stuff down. And at the same time, not all of the time are you going to have the people in-house to do that. So you're looking for cooperation. And the cooperation is like, who can I find that's going to help me help my clients go from here to there in that transformation and the deliverable of that promise, right? So we've got clarity, cooperation. We've got the competence and clarity, confidence, competence and cooperation. And now we're moving. It's like, okay, I found the right person. So a lot of times, instead of actually having it in-house, a lot of times that cooperation can be found outhouse. I won't say outhouse, but outsource partners, and that until you get to a certain point in time where that outsource partner is you've outgrown the outsource partner and now you can bring them in-house type thing. That's an often sort of this transformation. And that's when we're building capacity, which is that 5th C, capacity. And when we have the capacity, well, now everything's starting to seem like we've got it together, right? So I've got the capacity. I'm already this wheel of momentum is moving through. The new idea that I had, a week ago, a month ago, a quarter ago, is now coming through, and I'm feeling really good about this. And so is my team. And I've assigned accountability again, because I don't want to be frustrated with owning this thing forever. I'm the business leader, right? So what happens then? I can be creative again. And that's the last step. That's the 6th C of the wheel of momentum, is becoming creative again. Because when you become creative again, then the wheel starts again. It's like, okay, what are we going to do next? What are we going to, I got to clarify that. I got to get the confidence, the competence, cooperation, capacity. And so this whole thing, whenever you're stuck at any of these little areas, if you're stuck at confidence, you need to re-clarify. If you're stuck at capacity, you need to go back and look for other people that can help you cooperate in order to get the capacity, right? You can see how it just kind of works. It's like the wheel will stop. So you got to tread back one or sometimes two in order to move that ahead. But once it starts to go, it's like it kind of like a wheel going down the hill. And when you're at that stage and you've actually assigned accountability, now you can open up your leadership brain again and saying, we've got the team, we've got the stuff. This is working well. I've got the profit from it now. So what do I want to do next? And sometimes that's not even like from an entrepreneurship perspective, that might not even be the same business. It might be a different business. It might be, I want to buy a motel for passive revenues. It might be, any of these different things. So it's really interesting when you open that door and look at these different sort of business structures that entrepreneurs look at and frame them up in these two sort of frameworks to clarify your thinking.
Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense. Interesting way. There's lots of people requirements in there. So obviously as a leader, you need to hone your people skills pretty well, get them on board, they need to have the clarity of what you're trying to do as well. Then they build, as you say, their confidence and competence to be able to do the job. So yeah, absolutely understand. So are there any exciting, interesting examples of how applying the 5Ps and the wheel of momentum has impacted either your own businesses that you could share or your clients' businesses to help them perhaps scale and increase their own profitability?
For sure. I mean, just from, I gave you a couple already with my shoe stores, right? Adding another store. Well, that's a wheel of momentum thing, but it's also a 5P thing. These interlink. And so, when you just, it's really about what's the idea and how are we moving it ahead? And this is what I do pretty much every day with my clients. I've got a client that he's a musical instrument manufacturer and retailer. And it's like, okay, what's the next step? How are we going to take this through? And he wants to start a wholesale business. So it's like, okay, here's a whole new division. He does a little bit of wholesale, but he wants to focus on wholesale, right? And it's like, okay, here's a whole new division. Let's work through these different things so that we can build out the clarity of what we want to do with that. And, the other thing is that after working through this over the last, month and a half, basically in our meetings, he's decided that, what, I'm not ready to really push this button yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good decision, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good decision because now he can remove that from his head and move on to the things that he needs to finish before he is ready to move on to expanding the wholesale market. We were talking about trade shows. He's going to go to some trade shows and he's going to, fly overseas to do some stuff. And now that's all off the table, at least for 6 months, which is a perfectly good decision because he was worried and concerned and working through all this stuff. How am I going to make this happen? And at the end of the day, he's like, well, I'm not really ready to make it happen yet.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good decision because as entrepreneurs, that's what we need to do every single day is make the best decisions, not only for our lives, but for our businesses and everything else within it. So if that's the decision that he came to, then that's an awesome one.
Yeah. I guess he hadn't aligned his stepping stones. He was trying to make a big leap, but he can jump too far sometimes, I guess. And
I mean, we all want to grow quickly. I mean, we all do, right? But sometimes we just have to take a step back in order to take a step ahead or clean up some of the things that we were talking about, like take on the wheel of momentum. I got to go back and build my capacity a little bit before I can actually unleash a whole bunch of more instruments into the public.
Yeah. Just curious now, you did the exercise with your key brands. How long ago was that? Is it 6 months, a year ago?
That one was a couple of years ago.
A couple of years ago.
But that was when we were starting a new store.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I do is when I sit down with our buying cycles is like I literally have a scorecard for suppliers, and that scorecard we go through internally and I show it to them. So when I talk about my scorecard, it's kind of like, okay, well, what are their terms? How like I'll just reflect it back onto shoe stores because that's what we're doing, but what are their terms? What's their co-op amount that they have? How is their rep present in store or just virtual? There's a variety of different things. How are they for flipping out product that's underperforming? What kind of service are they giving us? From marketing, like we talked about the partnership. So I want to, I'm good with marketing their stuff, but I want them to take part of marketing that too. And so there's just a variety of different things. How are they good with delivering the orders? Like as far as purchase orders, are they actually delivering complete purchases that, in every time without mix-ups with, how simple is that process? Yeah. Because we don't want to work with companies that have, just ridiculous amounts of paperwork and everything to get us 20 pairs of shoes, so, all of those different things. And those are unique things to whatever your business is. But when we look at the frustrations that you have with, from a purchasing side of things with any of your suppliers, they'll be unique to you and your business. And that's perfectly fine. But what are they? List them down, 6 to 8 of them type thing, and then map it out on sort of a chart of 1 to 10 or 1 to 12. And how are these companies dealing with each of your 6 pain points of purchasing? Are they a 1? Are they a 5? Are they a 12? And, we want to be working with the ones obviously that are on the higher scope of this, but even if they're 10, 12 on each, 4 or 5 of them, they should know that you're really underperforming here compared to all the rest of my brands, because I'm getting this from them. So I want you to know that, on my little scorecard here, this is a sore point. And, so let's just be open about it.
Yeah, I like is the openness of this, where you're sharing, you've got very clear measures, you're sharing them with the supply base, you're communicating, I guess, very regularly about this. You're making sure there's interaction, whether that's physical or distance interaction these days. Do you ever, when you've brought your suppliers together, do you ever go through the scores at a top level or any level together, or
no.
you all do this individually? Okay.
Yeah, I've never done that together. No.
Yeah. Interesting.
No, I wouldn't do that together personally. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'll call a private conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And as they're all competing, that's why it's very difficult.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. What I'm interested to have is you've got a store pre-doing a lot of this exercise and a store post doing a lot of this. What's the biggest transformations you've seen? Is it perhaps in profitability, perhaps in performance, as a result of using this formula on your second store?
Well, I really just think, coming back to the whole clarity thing, Dave, it really brings clarity into, if we just finished another buying season. So in footwear, we buy twice a year. And although it's still winter here in Canada, in February, as we're recording this, we have literally bought for our winter next year already. We're done buying. And, I just kind of look at this stuff and it's like, okay, if we pull out these scorecards, and whether the scorecards are formal, like we talked about, or whether they're really in your head and you've thought about these different things in alignment and compared sort of apples to apples amongst each of the brands and each of the wholesalers, it's like, okay, well, how did we perform with that brand last year? And how many times did we turn? What's the gross margin? All of our retail stats that we're looking for, all of that sort of stuff. That's one thing. Okay. Those I can pull off my POS pretty simply. But this other framework that I'm talking about, how easy are they to deal with? Do they actually appreciate our business? Do they know our clients, so that when I sit down with them and talk to them in our buys, and most of our buys are virtual now, so we're not even touching the shoes and stuff like that. But have they been in my store in the last 2 years? Like, do they actually know who we are? Because they're suggesting stuff to me that's like, my stores are in small town. You're suggesting stuff that would be good in downtown London or downtown Toronto or whatever the case is. It's like, do you really know who I am?
Yeah, good point.
So,
good point.
We look at some of that stuff and it's like, okay, well, if you're more present and if you're suggesting the things that are going to work in my stores, and I've proven that they have, and your suggestions have been good in the past, then I'm going to allocate more money to you because that's my choice. I can allocate the money where I want to allocate it. Yeah. And I want to allocate it with the companies that are actually my partners in this. So, and sometimes it's hard to do, because sometimes my best brands are my crappiest partner. And that sucks.
Brilliant. Okay, before I ask one final question now, looking at the time, how would people hear more of what you got to say, get in touch with you? Where do they look for your information?
Easiest way is to just go on over to my website at simplifyingentrepreneurship.com. I've got a great business assessment there too at the top right-hand corner. You can just take the assessment, and that's it'll take you about 12, 15 minutes to do that assessment, but it spits you back a 50 to 60 page PDF document on all the things you're doing really well in your business and some of the things that you need to work on. So, simplifyingentrepreneurship.com, or you can catch me on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Pete Mohr MOHR. That's probably the best way, or on the Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do too.
Absolutely. Okay, one final question, looking at the time now. In your experience, what do you find are the most common areas that businesses tend to need your help and guidance? And are there any specific words of wisdom you would like to share today to help my audience reflect upon?
Well, if you're looking, we realizing that we're talking to buyers here and all of that sort of stuff. If you're looking to set up these scorecards, if you're looking to, set these sort of things in your business and you're looking for frameworks and all of those sort of stuff, then we should chat, around that. And from that perspective, I think, even if you're not looking to chat with me, think about the things that we talked about today. How can you apply a framework that's going to help you determine who you want to allocate your dollars to? And if you haven't been doing that, if you've been doing it in your head, try to take it out of your head and put it onto a simple framework that's going to help you make these decisions, not just from the numbers, but from these other things that we've been talking about here today, because they're just as important. They're going to help you get through your job. They're going to make you more money. They're going to actually reduce your frustration because you're aligning with the people that you want to and that work for you, not your worst ever. Remember from earlier in the podcast, not your worst ever, your best ever. And when you can work with your best ever all the time, boy, life is pretty good.
Yeah, you can really enjoy it then. Fantastic. That's been excellent. Really interesting thoughts there. I think that's superb information for people to listen to and take on board. So, Pete, thanks very much for all that fantastic knowledge that you shared today.
Hey, it's been a pleasure being here with you, Dave. I really appreciate you having me on.
No, that's brilliant. Take care and hope your podcast continues to do really well.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye. So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.